Good morning. Welcome to the 28th Annual Eggs and Issues from the Spencer Chamber of Commerce. I'm Sharifa Jones, Executive Director of the Spencer Chamber, and will be your moderator today. I'd like to thank Spencer Municipal Utilities for live streaming, Mediacom, who is recording for later broadcasting, Spencer Radio Group for airing live on KICD 1240 AM, Spencer Signal for covering the session via Facebook Live, and the Spencer Daily Reporter and Y100 for also reporting this session. We will start today by having our guest legislators give a brief opening statement, and then I will begin to ask the legislators questions that have been submitted to the Chamber by area citizens. Please note, the goal for this forum is to try and cover as many topics as possible in the time allowed. All questions will be shared with the legislators so that they may follow up with those who ask the questions. Next, I'd like to thank our legislators who represent this region for giving of their time to this informational forum. Let's start our opening statements today. Rob Sand will be joining us via Zoom a little later this morning, and so we'll allow him a little opening statement as well as specific questions. So, Senator Zach Whiting, representing District 1, if you want to go ahead and give us a brief overview.
Well, thanks so much for having us, and it's a different format that we have here. As Becky said when we came in, we don't have breakfast and all those great things that we do, and we certainly have fewer people. But for all the folks that are here, thank you to our folks in the media and in law enforcement and the folks that put this on, thank you. So we finished 2 weeks in the state legislature. I had a busy week. I'm on 8 committees this year. I had 13 subcommittees that I was on, so we're trying to move legislation forward out of the subcommittee process and get it into our committees. We meet via Zoom, so we sit usually 2 legislators in one room and 1 legislator in another room with a page or staff who kind of runs the computer, and then I have a big TV screen in front of me, and that's how we conduct the meetings. And so far it's actually worked pretty well, and I think we've adapted to how we, where we are at right now in the state of society with this pandemic. So this year I'm chairing the Labor and Business Relations Committee in the Senate, and then vice chairing the Administrative Rules Review Committee with Representative Jones, and then also vice chairing the RIF Budget Subcommittee, in addition to a lot of other committees. And so I'm looking forward to the questions that we get today, hearing from folks here in this district what is on their mind and what we can do as a matter of policy to move Iowa forward. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. And Representative John Wills, if you want to go ahead and give us a brief overview.
Thank you for letting us be here today. Thank you for all those that are out in the virtual world watching this. Wish that we could be in person, because I think we get a much better response and robust discussion. But at this stage, it's just not something that we can do. But looking forward to that as we get people starting to get immunized and we get people moving through the system as far as moving past this pandemic. So I look forward to that. Senator Whiting talked about maybe some of the conditions down in the Capitol. We are a little bit different down in Capitol. We do our subcommittees a little bit different than the House. We do in-person subcommittees, but we have the ability for folks to watch virtually. And so we still ask people that if they have serious concerns, they can either email us or virtually send questions, comments to us. But we also have people there in person talking about the issues that are important to them. We feel that in-person contact and working with people on an in-person basis is very important to the political process. And so we're just kind of going along on that line. But we are wearing face masks and social distancing and all that stuff, following the CDC guidelines as best as possible when we're doing those kind of things. And so I think we're a very safe situation. I feel very safe at the Capitol anyway. So far, we've done a lot of interesting and good things. Northwest Iowa should be proud of the things that we've accomplished so far. We've already, to date, moved the Life Amendment out of committee. and we'll probably be dealing with that on the House floor in the next 2 weeks. We've moved the Freedom Amendment out of a committee, and that'll be on the House floor in the next 2 weeks as well, along with a whole bunch of education, parental choice kind of things. We've looked at some tax issues. We've looked at a lot of different things that would be very interesting for Northwest Iowans, and I think that we are definitely bringing Northwest Iowa values down to Des Moines. And so I'm looking forward to the questions, looking forward to hearing what you have to say, and we'll go with that. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And Representative Megan Jones.
Thank you, excuse me, thank you, Sharifa, and thank you all for being here today. I know we have kind of a limited crowd, obviously, for COVID reasons, but thank you for those of you who are tuning in elsewhere. So the first week of the legislative session is a lot of ceremonial kind of thing. So we hear from the speaker, hear from the majority leader, hear from the minority leader. That kind of sets the tone for the rest of the legislative session. And then on Tuesday, we heard from the governor. Wednesday, we heard from the Chief Justice. And then on Thursday of that week, that first week, we heard from the National Guard. So a lot of updates, hearing from a lot of agencies and kind of where they're at. And then this last week is when bills really start to roll out. So I don't think our priorities really have changed a lot since before COVID. Before, we're kind of have those same problems lingering from February of last year, but we've just kind of added to it with COVID, right? So we're still hearing from people about broadband. We need to address broadband, and that was one of the first things that the governor came out and said, was that she wanted $450 million over the next, I think, 3 or 5 years to be dedicated toward building out broadband infrastructure. And COVID has really only increased the need for better broadband services in our communities and in our countryside. Mental health, obviously that's still a huge issue on the table, and we want to be able to help out the counties and the regions as much as we possibly can. So whether that be untangling some things, giving them some more options, or direct funding. I think the governor allocated $15 million in her budget to mental health. What I'm hearing from a lot of folks is that just simply isn't enough money to cover the problems that we're facing in mental health right now. So we'll have to continue to dig into that issue. Childcare, still hearing from a lot of parents, and that's even been multiplied now because those school districts that are not in person are really facing a crunch. If you're going back to work, but you don't have childcare and your kid's not in school, what are you doing? You're probably sending your kids to, maybe a neighbor's house, a friend's house, a friend of a friend's house, and trying to cover that gap as much as you possibly can. And our kids need structure. Our kids need a schedule, and so it's kind of a disservice that we're not keeping up with the times when it comes to childcare. So there's a lot of options on the table of what we can do to help bridge that gap, and so there's a lot of issues on the table when it comes to childcare, but we're certainly tackling them. Taxes, the governor last year released a pretty comprehensive plan on how to decrease property taxes and to help take that burden off of property owners. I think we will continue to look at how we can address the property tax issue in our state. Income taxes. I have a bill that eliminates the state income tax for child care providers so that we can help boost up their wages but not put that on the backs of the working families. So that kind of helps tackle two of those issues at once, but we'll hopefully see that bill in Ways and Means here in the coming weeks. But yeah, COVID has really only exemplified the need for some of these services and for some untangling of the government engagement in some of those things. So things look a little different at the Capitol this year. I've never said that someone has to drive all the way to the Capitol to interact with their legislators. Happy to communicate via phone, email, or whatever works. But yeah, things at the Capitol definitely look different. It's a lot quieter in those halls. People are definitely spread out. Less activity on the House floor. People are definitely spreading out, finding their own little spaces in the building. We're just making use of the best way that we can to make sure that people are spread out. They are wearing those masks, and we're still getting the job done and making sure that people's business is being done.
Wonderful, thank you. We'll now begin our questions. We are going to try, like I had mentioned, we're going to try and get through as many questions as possible. So let's go ahead and just get this party started and kick it off with some questions regarding the vaccine and the rollout in Iowa and Northwest Iowa specifically. How do you see it going? Will the normal citizen be able to assess how it is going? And also, how will citizens know which group they are in if they don't fall into a 1A or maybe a 1B? And how will citizens be notified? We had some specific questions relating to a 75-year-old gentleman who hasn't been notified yet, but he knows that a friend of his in another part of the state of Iowa has already been notified. So maybe just some general conversation as far as how you see the vaccine rollout going in the state of Iowa. We'll go ahead and start with Megan, if you want to go ahead and start.
Yeah, sure. So a lot of this is dependent on how many vaccines are allocated to which areas, right? So I think our healthcare providers are really doing the best job that they possibly can to get those vaccines out. You know, there's always going to be a little bit of differentiation between areas, well, I work in this county, but I live in this county, and I do business in this county, and where my hospital's in this county. So I think the best solution for folks who have questions about where they fall in that timeline or where they fall if they're currently eligible and how to access that, talk to your healthcare provider, talk to your doctor, just have that open line of communication, make sure that they know that you're interested in the vaccine, that you want to be on that list. And some places don't have a list going yet, but just keep in contact with your healthcare provider. Make sure that they know that you're interested in that vaccine. So, I think Spencer Hospital is doing a fantastic job, especially on social media. And I realize that not everybody has Facebook, but they really are doing a great job, along with the Department of Public Health, and putting out those charts and those graphics and making sure, when Tier 1B is rolling out February 1st. It's pretty explicit, those categories in which people fall, where the age demographics are, and what professions you would have to be in to be considered in each level. So I would just, bottom line, talk to your healthcare provider.
Great, thank you. And Representative Wills, if you want to go ahead and address some of those questions.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Sharifa. So here's the deal. There's a lot of frustration out there, not just from people that want to get a shot. There's a lot of frustration on the side of healthcare workers. Even the governor's office has a lot of frustration right now. And so everybody's frustrated, it seems. Part of the deal is there's just not enough vaccine to go around. We were promised that we'd have vaccine, and we did get it, but there was others that said, hey, we won't have vaccine until this summer. So we're getting vaccine. We're getting it out as fast as possible. I've gotten letters from 2 of my 3 hospitals that have been frustrated and said, listen, we've got extra vaccine. We've taken care of it, and this isn't my wheelhouse, so I don't know what the tiers are or anything like that. But they were like, we've got extra vaccine. Can we just start giving a vaccine to the folks that, to the next level tier? Well, the state wouldn't allow for that. Because they're kind of waiting for and wanting to maybe redistribute some of the vaccine that was out there so that the first tier gets done. We just have to be patient and understand that we need to get the most vulnerable. We need to get those tiers are put together in a way that the ones that need it first get the shot first, and then the next tier gets their shot. And so I believe on February 1st, 65-year-olds and older are the next tier. And so they're going to start being able to get the shots. I will tell you that healthcare workers and first line workers was a big group, and so those are all done. Those are done, and we're into the 75-year-olds. But I will tell you that the people that have contacted me individually and said, where do I go? We don't know anything about what to do. I've told them, contact your healthcare worker or contact the hospital, and they will direct you. And every single one of them that have been eligible have gotten a shot. And so that's my statement to you is if you think that you're in that tier, go ahead and contact the hospital, contact your healthcare worker. And I have not heard of or seen a single person that has been eligible that hasn't gotten a shot or hasn't gotten scheduled for a shot. And so I think that's good news because I guess warp speed did work. We weren't supposed to get the vaccine until next summer or later, 3 years, where it was another one that was thrown out. But here we got it within less than a year. So that's a good deal. People's lives will be saved because of it. And so we just have to move along on that vein.
Wonderful, thank you. And I did want to mention that those questions came from Doug Benjamin. He's the president of Northwest Bank. And now, Senator Whiting, if you would also address those similar questions and what you're seeing.
Sure, I'd be happy to. And I think the last point that Representative Wills made is a really important point to keep in mind is a little perspective on this. We're not even maybe in quite a full year into this. A novel coronavirus pandemic has spread across the world, and somehow we have brought together the best minds in science and pharmacology and the drug industry and in government and public health to develop and get out a vaccine, and that's a remarkable thing. And at the same time, now that it's developed, the great frustration is, and I hear this from a lot of people, is we're not getting it in the arms fast enough, and I think that's an absolutely valid concern. And so I'd echo a lot of the comments that my colleagues made. Is we always need to look at how we're doing this and how we can improve the delivery system. And so I think certainly going through your primary care physician, going through your hospital, your Department of Public Health at the local level is the best way to do that. Maybe we can build out waiting lists and things like that, and it's certainly dependent upon the allocations that actually come in. I've heard from hospitals in my district as well that and healthcare providers actually across the state. I've got a friend that's a doctor down in Des Moines that the concern is we're limited at who we can give that dose to because we're only in the 1A tier right now. And so when 1B opens up on February 1st, I think that's going to open up a whole new universe of people to give the vaccine to. And I'm hopeful that, as Representative Wills said, that anyone that wants one can get one. I've had we had a question come in here from a senior individual over 75. I've had senior folks in probably about that age range call me that want one. Anybody that wants one, I think, should get one. And then just on a personal matter, I'll just throw this into the discussion. So I've seen the tiers in the 1B that come out, and it's maybe, I don't know, 5 or 6 or 7 tiers, however many it is. And I think about the 4th tier is continuity of government and allowing folks that work, for example, in the State House to get it. I'm okay with that if the public health has identified, State Department of Public Health has identified the need for continuity of government. I've had constituents ask me, are you going to get it? And it's not, I am not going to get it, and it's not because I'm against the vaccine or have any doubts or concerns about it. I look at it this way. I've already had COVID, so I should have built up antibody resistance, and there's probably people that are in more vulnerable situations and populations that need it than I do. So I personally won't be getting it, and hopefully that dose can be used for someone else that has written in and asked us that wants it. I want it to go to the people that need it, and anyone that wants it can get it. And that's my hope as we transition into a new presidential administration, that we can coordinate those efforts between federal, state, and local entities and make sure that the goal is always there. Anyone that wants a shot in their arm can get a shot put in the arm, and that we can work towards getting past this pandemic.
Great. Thank you, Senator Whiting. Representative Wills wanted to elaborate just a little bit, and then following that, we will be able to hear from State Auditor Rob Sand.
Thank you again, and I apologize for coming back, but I did remember something in conversations with the governor. Right now we have 2 manufacturers who are authorized to provide vaccine, and they're producing vaccine as fast as possible. And Iowa actually had a truckload of vaccine that had to be returned because the freezer compartment stopped working, so the vaccine got bad. So we lost some vaccines due to that. But in the next week, the governor expects Johnson & Johnson to have emergency approval to release their vaccine. And so then we'll have actually 3 producers of vaccine that are going to be able to be used for vaccinations across the nation. And so that should really ramp up the number of people that can get vaccinated here in the next week. It'll take a little bit of time for those vaccinations to get out to the public and to get to the states and stuff like that. But realize that we are in a very rapid buildup of vaccine production and distribution.
Great. Thank you to all three of you. Okay, we have been joined by State Auditor Rob Sand, and so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to him, as we do have him for a limited amount of time this morning, and go ahead and ask him, just some information and opening statements regarding his time. And we can start, if you could just share a little bit with us, Auditor Sand, a little bit of some information on your background, maybe where you were before you became the state auditor.
Sure. Yeah, thank you all for having me. And that was Tate, my 6-year-old. Do you want to wave, buddy? Making a brief appearance on the camera there. I had a mix-up in my calendars, and we had a commitment for this weekend together. So I really appreciate you all letting me show up via Zoom, so I can stick with the plan with this guy. We're having a fun father-son weekend. I'm a native of Decorah up in northeast Iowa. And I was in my 8th year at the Attorney General's office as the chief financial crimes and public corruption prosecutor in Iowa before I ran for state auditor. So I'd done quite a bit of work with the auditor's office. They investigate most of the public corruption cases in Iowa, and I had prosecuted most of the public corruption cases in Iowa. So I knew folks over there, knew the work they did, had seen a couple of things I thought should be done differently. And in 2017, I realized that criminal prosecution was wearing on me. It's pretty negative work. By the time you get to a prosecution, you're talking about the worst things that people can do to each other. And wanted to find something I could do that I could feel more optimistic about, and thought about the auditor's office and what I knew they did over there and the ways they could do it differently, do it better. And so I decided to give it a run. So here we are, we're 2 years in. We've already accomplished the things that we set out to accomplish that I talked about during that campaign. One was adding law enforcement professionals to the office. Obviously, I have a law enforcement background, and I had seen a couple of issues that had popped up related to the auditor's office, including up in northwest Iowa, actually in Anthony. I know it's not Clay County, but nearby, where issues came up that shouldn't have and wouldn't have if you had someone with a law enforcement background working from day one on those investigations. So we've added 2 individuals with a law enforcement background to our investigative unit. And we have also created a new system for promoting efficiency across government in Iowa. It's called PI. PI stands for Public Innovations and Efficiencies, and we named it that because we think it should be as popular as PI. We just finished the first year of submissions, and we hope to be out with awards fairly soon. I do want to say thank you to Clay County. We did have responses from Clay County. I actually think we hit all 99 counties in the first year of the program, which is really fantastic. I'll give you a very brief explanation of the program prior to just answering your questions. We have what we call the pie chart, a very basic checklist of good practices to save money in your own home or in the public sector. We ask everybody to fill it out, and then we're going to give awards to those who do the best. That would be our pie contest. And then finally, last bad joke, we are looking for pie recipes. So if anybody in Spencer or in Clay County had a eureka moment and put something together that has saved taxpayer money, we would love to hear about it and add it to our pie charts. We can send it around to the whole state of Iowa, and other people can learn from it and institute it in their home communities as well. So we have been busy, obviously still continuing with our regular audit work as well as our regular investigative work. We released, I think, the 3rd biggest investigation that the office has seen in decades. One that on my 2nd day in the office, we sat down with the FBI to get them involved as well. So we've been very busy. We do have one, I hope you're enjoying the monkey gym in the background here. We do have a few bills that we're hoping to see the legislature pass. One of them is very important. And I was recently talking about this with former Auditor Dave Vaught. The office needs to change its funding system. Its funding system is laid out by Iowa law, and so it's up to the legislature to fix it. What we would like to do is have every state agency and every state department have some skin in the game. I'm a believer that market incentives can work to get people to behave properly. And so what we'd like to see is every state agency get billed for its own audit. That means that during the course of the year, if they're about to do something that might be a bad idea, they might think, hey, this could end up costing us money. Maybe we should check with the auditor's office first. And that would be good for them, that would be good for us, and that would be good for you as taxpayers. Good all around. Here's the other issue. Right now, the law makes a distinction between agencies that get federal dollars and those that don't. The feds have looked at this and they have decided that they don't like it. They do give a lot of money to the state of Iowa, and they are auditing currently, I think, the 2016 year actuals. So again, this is prior to my time, but they don't think it's fair to the feds to do it this way, and they're going to fine the state of Iowa money every year until it gets fixed. So I'm hoping very strongly that the legislature will get that fixed this year, because it would not only create a better program, but would also prevent us from wasting taxpayer money paying a fine to the federal government. So my monkey boy here suggests that I quit rambling and open it up to any questions anybody has.
Thank you very much. So we have a few questions. Some of them you've already talked just briefly about. These are from Troy Leininger with Clay County Farm Bureau. Many may not know what the state auditor does, and you've alluded to a little bit of that. So an explanation on duties would be great. What are your priorities for the coming year? How will you reach those goals? And what resources does the state auditor have to offer citizens that you would like to highlight?
Sure. Troy, those are all really good questions. Thanks for asking them. I guess if I'm going to start, what the state auditor does was actually the most common question I had on the campaign trail. For those of you who are interested, every Tuesday at 4:45 p.m., I turn on Facebook Live. It's just Rob Sand Facebook page. And I do a Facebook Live where I tell folks, here's what I did this week. Most of my week personally comes down to management issues. We've got about 100 people in the office, sending emails, having meetings. But I give you the highlights during Transparency Tuesdays, we call it, Tuesdays at 4:45. Buddy, don't shine a light at everybody, all right? But Tuesdays at 4:45 is a good opportunity to hear a little bit more about that. At the end of the day, there's really three things that the office now does. We have always traditionally done audits, and we continue to do those. We've also always traditionally done public corruption investigations. We continue to do those. And we now are also doing more of the efficiency promotion that the office has always had the authority to do, but wasn't really doing. That was actually the biggest reason I wanted to run for the office. I saw in Chapter 11 of the Iowa Code the ability for the office to really be an advocate and a force for efficiency in taxpayer dollar usage, and I wanted to do that, and so now we're doing it. So that's essentially what the office does. Easiest way to sum it up is taxpayers watchdog. That's the best way to explain it. My priorities for the coming year, we need to continue to do the work that we have to do by statute. We're obligated to do a lot of different audits of state agencies and departments. We also do local audits. And then I'd really like to see the legislature get that funding reform proposal passed. I have a couple of other proposals too that I think are just good common sense proposals. Most of them have to do with the way the office works. One of them has to do with the fact that right now in Iowa, we often see people steal large amounts of taxpayer money and get probation. I saw it when I was prosecuting cases like this. Prosecutors right now have no ability to force people to spend any amount of time in prison for stealing large amounts, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of taxpayer dollars. I'd really like to see that change so that someone who embezzles a large amount of money from taxpayers has to serve some time in prison. It doesn't have to be a long sentence. It doesn't have to be 10 years or 5 years or even 2 years. The idea behind the law is that it would say no longer can you just walk. No longer can you just get probation. So that is my hope to see that get passed as well. Thanks, Troy. I hope I hit them all. If I didn't, you can come back to any piece of that.
Thank you. We'll make sure to send you the questions too, so if you want to follow up any further, you certainly can do that. The next couple of questions are from Rod Mendering, who's a CPA with Winther Stave and Company here in Spencer. Has COVID had an impact on audits? That's his first question, and if we have time for the others, I'll go ahead and go back to those.
Okay, sure. Rod, thanks for your question. Thanks for the work you're doing up there. Short answer is yes. It definitely has. We were not, hey buddy, please, okay. All right, just have a seat in the back. We were not anticipating the pandemic, but when I started in January 2019, one of our biggest priorities was helping the office, helping our employees travel less and be able to work from home more. And the reason we wanted to do those things is I sat down one-on-one with any employee that wanted my time when I started in the first 3 months. And those are the two biggest issues that we heard from people. We want to be able to work from home, and we want to be able to travel less. And it was a competitiveness issue. We were losing a lot of good employees, people that would be good public servants, losing them to Principal Financial, losing them to Travelers Insurance or Nationwide, whoever, because they didn't want to travel so much. So we spent actually most of 2019 getting our office set up technologically in terms of the culture of the office, and also in terms of just the handbook, the rules, to let people work from home more and let people travel less. So when the pandemic hit in March, it was pretty easy for us to actually suspend travel and have everybody work at home. 3 months later, we did a survey, and about 20% of the office said they really needed to be back in the office for productivity purposes. With just 20% going back, they can go back and stay distanced from each other relatively easily. And so that's what we've done with them. Now we got Kilroy over here behind me. I'm glad we're having fun at least. I hope you all are enjoying the show. So it has been tough. We haven't been traveling out to see our clients. We're going to return when this pandemic is over to a happy medium. We had been traveling too much, and now we're not traveling enough. It's easy to call it what it is. Here's the problem. If we were traveling, we'd be having people come from Des Moines, and we would be super spreaders. We would be going around the state, coming over here, then going home, then going over there, and we'd be doing a lot of traveling that would, at the end of the day, just help the spread. So it's not ideal to not be with our clients, but it's working okay. It has done okay. So it's affected our audits. Our productivity has been up and down. I think overall it's about where it was. We have some folks who really enjoy working at home and want to stay that way, doing it forever, and other folks who don't. But it seems to about even out. So it's certainly changed the way we work. I don't know that it has made it worse. And there are certainly some things that we have learned that we like that we're going to keep going forward. So I think that's a very Midwestern way to look at it, very Iowan way to look at it. Just look for those silver linings.
Great.
You want to ask his next question there?
Yes, I will. And thank you for the patience of your son, too. I know that can be very trying. So we'll do one more question, and then you let us know how we're doing. You have mentioned that the state misappropriated COVID funds. Have local governments been made aware of proper uses of COVID funds?
From our office, we have tried to do that. I know the federal guidance that has gone out it's changed with some specificity. So yeah, we've had issues. There was the $21 million that was put into Workday that just wasn't appropriate. There's a couple of other issues where, at the end of the day, that money that came in the Coronavirus Relief Fund from the CARES Act really is to just help make this less miserable for you and me and everybody else in this state. And so, it's not appropriate for the governor to put that money into software for state employees. There's some other uses that we're concerned about as well, that we're digging in on. Local government has got to be aware of those issues as well. At the end of the day, what they need to be doing is asking themselves, are we spending this money in a way that alleviates the pandemic, that makes this less miserable, right? And it's fairly broad for how that's defined in the guidance from the federal government. If you are hiring more contact tracers, if you are spending it to increase testing, if you are spending it for to hire an extra nurse or two at the county hospital because you've just got more people in the hospital, if you are buying medical equipment, diagnostic equipment related to COVID, if you are buying PPE for anyone, even just to give out to the public. There are lots of good, appropriate uses. As long as you're spending the money in a way that's really aimed at mitigating the pandemic for folks and making it less severe, you should be good going forward. So we've put out a little bit of guidance on that. Obviously, most of that guidance comes from the federal government because at the end of the day, it's their money. But yeah, we have been working on that.
Thank you. And do you have any other last comments or information that you'd like to share with those that are joining us today and listening as well?
Yeah, I can't remember which question I thought this was relevant to, but then I forgot to come back to it. I will mention another thing that we're doing in our office that I'm excited about, and it's a new rule that we call statewide work, statewide jobs. Our office works statewide. We have clients in all 99 counties. So the new rule in our office is you can live anywhere in the state of Iowa, and we will assign you to local work in your geographic region. I really like this. Number one, it's good for our employees because if they want to live in Spencer, if they want to live in Decorah, now they can do that. Number two, it actually reduces travel costs for our clients. So if you're living in Spencer, what we'll do is we'll just assign you to the work closest to you that the office does in Northwest Iowa. And that way, you don't have to get hotels at night. You see your family more, and your clients don't have to pay for hotel stays, so it saves money for them. Biggest thing about this to me, and this is just really, at the end of the day, to me, if you're in politics for the right reasons, you're doing it to make an impact in people's lives. And this is one of those really simple changes that when I'm looking back, even just at the 2 years that I've been in the office, and asking myself, am I doing the right thing? I always look at this and know that this is making a difference. Because I know what it's like to grow up in a small town, to live in a small town, and to really, with every family that moves to town or every family that moves away, with every storefront that opens up or storefront that closes down, I know what that feeling is to wonder, are we going to stay here or are we disappearing? And to see some of our employees move out to smaller towns, to see one of them, it's the opposite corner of the state, but to see one of them, given the question that we had from the local CPA here, if that was Rod, good. If it wasn't, then I apologize for forgetting your name. But we had someone, a younger employee in our office who took their job and moved back to Mount Pleasant in southeast Iowa and then joined a small CPA firm in town, which I think is great. It's just, we want people to be all around this state, and we want people with good jobs to be all around this state. And I think if you're running a piece of state government, you've got an obligation to make sure that you're serving the whole state. And part of the way that any piece of the state is served is through employment. So we should be distributing the benefits of the job, of the office, the jobs, to places that are not automatically the most prosperous part of the state. People in Des Moines, if a restaurant closes down, the automatic reaction is, well, I hope I like the next one better. There's an assumption that it's going to open up, that there's going to be a different one that opens up afterwards. So the more we can have people move out of the Des Moines area and into small towns around the state, the better it is for the state of Iowa, the better it is for our clients, and the better it is, I think, for everyone. And that's one of those things that when I look back, just in the 2 years that we've been there, I'm really proud of that, because I know that the presence of those people means more to those smaller towns than it means to the city of Des Moines or to Polk County. So that's the other piece that I wanted to mention. And other than that, if you've got any other questions, I've got a few minutes, and if not, I'll say thanks and goodbye.
Well, we'll ask one more question then, if your son is up for it. I know he's been really patient, so, yeah. And you were correct, it was Rod Mendering, who's a CPA with Winther, Stave & Co. Another one of his questions is, do you see any changes to periodic examinations, and are they making a difference?
Rod, that is a really good question. I am actually super glad you asked that. Talk to your local electeds there, because that is another one of our proposed bills. So for Rod and I know what we're talking about here. For everybody else, periodic examinations are a new effort in the auditor's office. And the idea is we have a lot of really little towns in Iowa, towns under 1,000 people, that prior to instituting periodic examinations never got any financial examination at all. And so we instituted a system. This is, I want to say back in 2012, 2014, probably 2014. And what it does is every 8 years, all these little towns are going to get their number called, and they're going to get a periodic examination. It's not a full-blown audit, but we come in, or a CPA firm comes in and takes a look at what's going on and gives them some advice on what they should be doing better to better protect taxpayer resources. What we have discovered is that the program needs at least one piece of an adjustment. When they passed the law, they thought, well, we think we can get all these towns examined at a rate of $375,000 each year. And so it's essentially, it's like an insurance pool. Every one of these little towns pays in a little bit each year, same amount. And then at one point in that 8 years, their number gets called for their examination. Two problems. Number one, that number was too low. They were kind of shooting in the dark, and it turns out that the finances in these little towns are harder and more problematic than we anticipated. And number two, after this new census, there are going to be more of these little towns. And so we have more periodic examinations to do. So Rod, I'd encourage you, I've talked with ISCPA about this. I'd encourage you to talk to folks and encourage them to see this statute get passed. We want to increase the amount of money that's available to the auditor's office and to the CPA firms that do these via contract in order to get the work done correctly, right? It's not a question of is there any waste in the program. I mean, we have really squeezed all the juice out of that 375 that we possibly can. And the fact of the matter is, this is the first time through this 8-year program, so they were kind of guessing when they picked that number, and they guessed low. My guess is that they did that because it was easier to get the bill passed that way. But to me, truth is paramount, and we always need to be adhering to the truth. And the truth is, to get all of these little towns examined and get it done right, that just doesn't get us there. So I don't anticipate changes to the way it's getting done, other than if we don't get this passed, these periodic examinations will get more and more surface level, which is less and less helpful.
Wonderful. Thank you for answering that question. That is really addresses the majority of the questions that we had for you. However, we will follow up and send you all of the questions that were answered as part of today's session. We want to thank you and your son for your patience and for being flexible and using technology to the best of our ability. So thank you very much.
You bet. And thank you all for letting me stick with the plan with Tate. I don't know if you can see him right now, but might be better that you can. I really appreciate you being flexible as well. So thank you all. And everybody, hope you have a good weekend.
Thank you and have a great camping trip. Bye-bye.
All right. Will do.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, we will go ahead and start back with our other questions that we have here. And we're going to go ahead and jump into a conversation about mental health. And so with that, we will start with Senator Zach Whiting. Senator, can you tell me and talk to those that are listening a little bit about what are some of the specific steps the state of Iowa needs to take in order to ensure that comprehensive mental health services, inpatient care through outpatient therapy are in place in all areas of Iowa?
Well, when I ran for office a few years ago, as I traveled across my district, mental health was always one of the top 2 or 3 issues that I heard from folks about, and I think that's only been exacerbated by the pandemic. What we have seen is that there may very well be some negative impacts to the isolation and shutdowns and some of those things that may have been necessary as a matter of public health, but may have a severe impact on the mental and social health of people. And so that's kids in schools, folks that have to work from home that, as the auditor mentioned, may not feel as productive, and all those things. So we need to make sure that mental health is at the top of the list of things that the legislature tackles. It was, I think, very much at the top of the list last year, but for the pandemic kind of closing things down. I think Representative Jones alluded to it earlier. The governor had a plan last year that I think was kind of an elegant plan, a way to tackle through the use of the sales tax, shifting mental health funding off of property taxes, have some of that go through the sales tax, and then also tackle something that's important in our district is water quality and water quality and the I Will program. It doesn't appear that specific program is going forward, so we've got to go back to the drawing board. All of these things that are in this question are key. Is we need to make sure, one, that we're recruiting good practitioners into the state, and that we have adequate means to educate them here in the state and retain them when we do. And I've heard a lot of things, ideas, loan incentives and student loan payback incentives and things like that, especially for rural Iowa, is key. And then 2, it's continuing, and I think we've done a great job in the culture of doing this, but it's continuing to reduce the stigma that seeking help for mental health is an okay thing. It's not, you're not, if you have a heart condition, you go to a doctor. If you have a head condition, it's okay to seek therapy and mental health services. And so making sure, one, that we have the practitioners, the infrastructure in place, and then making sure that people know that they can and are encouraged to go. I think those are all the things we need to do. And then finally, this is always the question in government, is how do we pay for it? And what role should government have in paying for that? And so I think that's one of the difficult questions that we need to tackle as a state this year from a funding side of thing. But as a matter of policy and just as a matter of reality, we need to focus on, invest in, and make sure that people have mental health services. Where we're at in this stage of the world, literally, people's lives depend on it.
Thank you. And Representative Wills, will you go ahead and address the question regarding mental health services?
Absolutely. So this is an important issue, and last year it was, as Senator Whiting said, it was a top priority. We ejected a lot of things last year that were priorities just simply because we needed to get out of Dodge or Des Moines in that sense because of the COVID issue. So we did have to put a lot of things on hold and bring them back this year. Mental health is one of those issues. Over the last 2 years prior, we have delved into some pretty big major overhauls of mental health in and of itself. We had an adults mental health bill 2 years ago, and then last year, I guess 2 years ago now, was the children's mental health, and then we were going to fund it last year. And so we've really kind of revamped a lot of mental health issues over the last 3 years. We were going to fund it last year, and just because of COVID, we weren't able to fund it. I'm a big believer that what we've done with the COVID shutdowns and the COVID slowdowns has affected mental health. There's study after study that shows that when unemployment rises, so does domestic violence, so does mental health issues, so does drug use, so does alcoholism. All of those things rise as unemployment rises, and we involuntarily made people stop working for a number of months. And so, of course, we've got an increase in mental health and all kinds of issues, as I'm sure our local police could tell us that those things have all increased over the last while. Look at some of our bigger cities, New York, Chicago, all of their crime rates are on the increase, and I believe it's directly tied to the COVID issue. So we need to look at mental health. We need to really make sure that we're doing the right things. I believe especially we need to fund mental health. I hate that mental health right now is funded primarily through property taxes. That's not the proper spot for mental health to be funded, and so each of us is paying a levy. If we own property, we're paying a levy towards mental health issues, and that's not equally spread throughout the state. And so sometimes we're paying more, sometimes we're paying less than we should, and I think that we should fix that. The governor's plan last year was a good one, a sound one, I believe. She didn't feel she had time and resources to deal with that this year, so it's likely to come back next year. But that doesn't mean we in the legislature have to stop looking at solutions. So I think that there is a solution out there. We just have to come up with the right way to do it and the right sound way to do it that both lowers property tax but also is equitable for all of the regions, because I don't see us getting rid of the regions, the mental health regions at all, because I think they are operating fairly well with some exceptions. And so I believe that as we move through this mental health issue, there's going to be a lot of questions. If it was an easy problem to solve, it would have been solved 30 years ago. And so I don't think that we're going to solve it in just 3 years. But as we move through it, I think we're going to make it better each and every time.
Thank you. And Representative Jones, if you want to go ahead and answer that question as well.
Sure. Yeah. So I think let's take a step back and let's talk about the governor's Invest in Iowa Act that she proposed last legislative session. So basically, what her proposal did on the second day of session that she unveiled would have increased the state sales tax, and constitutionally, a measure that was passed overwhelmingly in 2010, passed by Iowans, said that upon the next sales tax increase, 3/8 of that cent, or 3/8 of the penny, would be dedicated towards the Iowa Fund, and Senator Whiting spoke about that. Excuse me. And so what that sales tax increase would automatically do is to fund the Iowa program. And John, you would know better than me, but about 60% of that money would go right away towards water quality. And so that's a huge, huge injection into our water quality programs in our state, which is still an issue. I mean, with COVID being as taking up as much space in our brains as it is right now, we can't forget underlying public health issues, and water quality is certainly one of them. So that takes the water quality issue it takes care of it with that sales tax increase. But then people say, well, what about the rest of that penny? Because you'd most likely raise the sales tax a penny. What do you do with that rest of the money? Well, mental health reform, funding mental health services at the county or the state level rather than the county level is really a pretty good idea. I mean, we're only one of a handful of states, maybe 4 states in the nation, that pay for mental health services on a county level. So right now, the issues with mental health are county issues, right? But you hear us talking about this all the time, because at some point we need statewide engagement, because it's just too much, it's too expensive, and it's really not appropriate to be funding mental health services with property tax dollars. As Representative Wills alluded to, this is really an issue for all of us, right? So this is an issue better suited to be put on the sales tax rolls so that everybody has an opportunity to contribute to those funds, rather than just arbitrarily picking out a group of people who just happen to own property, and we're going to say, well, you're responsible for mental health services in our state. And obviously, if other states overwhelmingly aren't doing it that way, then maybe we need to reevaluate what we're doing too. So I really was excited about the governor's plan last year. I was hoping we would see another plan like that this year, but as we head into session, it's very clear that we need to be moving very, very quickly. People need to be out of that building. The legislature needs to kind of be working at a very quick pace, and I think we are, but to get us out of there and get people back into their districts. So again, I would also expect a similar proposal next year. This is a big lift. It's a very, very big piece of legislation. It's a very big proposal. And I should say, when I back up a little bit, when we would put mental health services on with more state funding than property taxes, your property taxes should be going down. I mean, of course, we would need to hold our county officials responsible for that, but certainly there's a great opportunity there for some property tax relief. So I think that bill had a lot of great qualities, but there's a lot of moving parts to it, a lot of people involved, and it impacts a lot of systems. And so we need to make sure that we do it correctly when we're engaging on that level. So it's going to take a little bit more time, so we'll just probably take the next year, look at that piece of legislation, see where we can fill in some gaps as we move along. But certainly, mental health is a big deal, even though it's kind of more of a county issue, but we clearly need some more statewide engagement.
Great, thank you. And I'd like to thank Bill Kirstein, who sent that question into our office as well. We're going to shift gears a little bit and address a few questions relating to agriculture. Jarrett Smith, who's a Channel District Manager, has this question. What does the new administration holding the presidency, House, and Senate mean to Iowa agriculture moving forward? Any conversations relating to renewable fuels, exports, and any new policy potential affecting production ag are also some questions that he has. So Representative Jones, if you want to go ahead and start.
Sure. Well, I'm not going to pretend to be able to speak on behalf of the Biden administration. And this is a lot of federal policy, but I think it is up to us, the agricultural community, to engage with those leaders and make sure that they understand agriculture. And I would say that we're pretty lucky to have the former governor of Iowa at the head of the USDA. And while I may not agree with all of his policies and proposals, he is from Iowa and he does understand agricultural production in our state. So hopefully it's not a huge shift. Hopefully going from Vilsack to Purdue to Vilsack again, it's a pretty smooth transition. But as agricultural folks, we are going to have to engage with our federal leaders to make sure that they understand agriculture, that they understand farming, and the basics of that. I will never forget Senator Ernst having to explain to federal leaders why you can't just keep hogs back, right? So people were saying, well, I don't understand why we're having such a block in our food chain supply. You know, just keep the pigs in the field. Well, that's not how things work anymore, right? I mean, seeing a pig in a field is pretty rare these days. Hog production is just different now, and so we need to educate our leaders on how that all happens. The food supply chain. So that's going to be up to us. I'm a little nervous, but we're going to have to be strong advocates for Iowa.
Great, thank you. And Representative Wills, if you want to go ahead and address those questions.
Thank you, Jarrett, for the question. This is a great question. You know, on the state level, I don't know that we can really impact the federal side of things very effectively, but we can impact on the state side of things and do good things here in the state. But I would like to address a few things that I think will happen on the federal side. I think it's already started. President Biden has done an executive order saying that the Keystone Pipeline is going to be shut down. Well, this is directly going to affect gas prices. It's directly going to affect our fossil fuel industry. But more importantly to Iowa, is going to affect the ethanol industry as well. By shutting down the Keystone Pipeline, that's going to make less gasoline available. That's going to increase the price of gasoline. Now, for the short term, that's going to improve the need or the desire for ethanol. But I believe in the long term, that's going to affect ethanol in a negative light, which means that our farmers will be affected in a poor way. I think other states also can affect Iowa and the agricultural industry. California, for example, has enacted a law that says that by 2035, all cars sold in California will be electric vehicles. Well, that's directly going to affect Iowa agriculture, especially Iowa ethanol. California is a huge fossil fuel market right now. We sell tons of ethanol out to California and that area. And so all of those things combined are really going to affect especially the ethanol industry. And so we have looked at on the state side, how can we positively impact the ethanol industry and start the conversation for how can we affect the ethanol industry in a positive light and increase the use of ethanol products across the nation, across the world. Well, part of that, again, as a federal issue, is trade. I think that I have submitted 2 resolutions that I would like to be passed in the Iowa House, perhaps through the Iowa Senate, that would ask for Congress to enact a trade agreement, a bilateral trade agreement with Taiwan, which is a huge producer or user of our agricultural products. Also, to do a bilateral trade agreement with the United Kingdom, which is a huge user of our products, but also would be a key way into the European Union. Right now, European Union is closed off to American agricultural products for the most part, and so we need to find a way to get our products into the European Union as another trade area. I have also submitted a resolution that I hope is passed in the Iowa House and the Iowa Senate that asks the U.S. Congress to pass the PRIME Act. The PRIME Act is an act that would allow for interstate commerce of meat products from lockers that are not federally inspected. Right now, if you try to buy meat from a locker plant in Minnesota, for example, you could only do that through a federally inspected meat locker. Well, that just increases the price because a federally inspected meat locker has to have a federal inspector on board. Well, that means only the large meat processing plants like Smithfield and so forth are going to have the ability to do interstate commerce. And so the PRIME Act, which is a bill that's been in the U.S. House and Senate for years, is vital, I think, for food security for the state of Iowa and for the ability for state of Iowa to really start out processing and outputting their food products, our food products, and allowing interstate commerce between the other states. I have also, on a state level, co-signed a bill with Skylar Wheeler from Sioux County that is a Food Security Act, pure and simple. It allows for individual retail sale and purchase of agricultural products from meat to eggs to whatever on a farm. So you can go to your neighboring farm and say, hey, I'd like to buy a portion of a hog, and that farmer, that producer could then sell you a portion of that hog right from their farm. Now, I know that it's being done, but it's illegal. And so this bill would actually make this legal. Now, both parties have to realize that there's not a meat inspection and various things like that, but I believe that this is a great bill that will allow for food security. If we look at the pandemic, right now the lockers in Iowa are still booked out till April, May. Some are even booked out to June, and you can't get meat products. You can't get a hog butchered or a cow butchered and get the meat back from it until then. And so we need to look at different ways to make our food system more secure so that when we are challenged like we were with the pandemic, that we can get that food out to the people very quickly and very efficiently. And so I've kind of mixed some state issues along with some federal issues, but I think that the federal, who knows what the federal issues are going to happen or how they're going to happen. Will they affect Iowa? They absolutely will. Only time will tell if they will affect Iowa in a positive light or a negative light. I've outlined some areas where I think it could go both ways. But here in the state of Iowa, we're not going to stand still and wait for the federal government to act. We're going to act now in a decisive manner so that Iowa is protected and Iowa is regarded as a priority.
Great. Thank you, Representative Wells. Senator Whiting, if you want to go ahead and address those agricultural questions as well.
Sure, I'd be happy to, Jared, and thanks so much for the questions you gave. And if I could just take about the last 2 or 3 sentences of what Representative Wills just said and just have that be my statement, that'd probably be good enough. But I did jot down a few things, and it is echoing a little bit of what my colleague said. It's kind of all of those things. Is that yes, largely this is going to be driven from a federal policy perspective, but there are things that we can and should be doing in the state. And And frankly, all those bills and ideas that Representative Wills had, I think, are great ideas and something that we absolutely need to consider. Representative Jones talked about, well, how can we engage at the state level at the local level in ag policy? Well, we have a new congressman in Northwest Iowa and I guess North Central Iowa, Randy Feenstra, who's a former colleague of mine and the Iowa Senate and ours in the legislature, and he wants to be a strong voice for agriculture in the Congress. And so working with Congressman Feenstra on that, I think, is going to be key. You kind of look at some of the policies that happened under the last 4 years. I think on trade and exports, I think things were very, very good under the Trump administration. And then I think if you ask Senator Grassley what he thinks about how things were done at the EPA and through the RFS, he'd say probably pretty bad. And so it's TBD, as Representative Wills just said, on what the direction of ag policy is going to be under the new administration. But we do need to have a watchful eye. Then just a couple other just random thoughts I jotted down, kind of riffing off what my colleague said. And I also saw a question here, Jarrett, that you said is, will the Ninth Circuit in California have negative impacts for us? Yes, absolutely, always. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals is always going to probably mean bad things for the people of Iowa. Pretty radical court out there. But the point on California is actually a really on California state laws that Representative Wills just talked about, I think, is a really good point. So under the federal Constitution, the Commerce Clause and interstate commerce is a enumerated power that the Congress has the power to regulate. A sort of derivative of that is the Dormant Commerce Clause, the idea that states themselves aren't supposed to have pass policies that have an undue burden on interstate commerce. And we see a lot of examples that come out of the state of California in particular of laws and regulations in the state of California that are so ridiculous that they effectively have an effect on interstate commerce. And so I was in an office one day and there was a folding chair that was sitting up against the wall, probably in a doctor's office, and they're sitting up there and they said, and this chair was manufactured in compliance with the California Department of Home Furnishings or whatever crazy department they had. So because that chair was going to be sold in the state of California, this manufacturer had to go out of their way to make sure that they manufactured their chair in a way that fit California state law, and they had to print and put a label on the bottom of that. Now people think, well, geez, it's not that hard to print and put a label on that. But in the aggregate, all of that adds up, and it's costs that go on to manufacturers that are passed on to consumers because of radical laws that are being passed out of the state of California. So on that point, and we've had things like that on chicken cages where they want to have their chicken cages be a certain size, and so if we want to transport our chickens across the country into the state of California from Iowa, we have to have a certain cage size. So what we need to do maybe then is at a state level is how can we stand up to those kinds of overreaches from sister states and make sure that they are not burdening the way that we operate and conduct our laws in the state of Iowa, which is an agricultural state. And sure, California's got some ag and they've got some fertile valleys and stuff like that, but they should not be negatively impacting how we live, work, and operate and run agriculture in Iowa. And then the final piece, that was kind of me getting on my soapbox about California regulations, but the last piece too is the Keystone Pipeline. That's one of the very first decisions that the president made is on the Keystone Pipeline, and the premier of Alberta comes out and says, well, that seems like it's an affront to Canada and harms the relationship that we have. So we spent the last 4 years hearing about the negative impact that the Trump administration had in geopolitics and all these sorts of things, and apparently our best friends to the north already feel slighted 2 or 3 days in. So yes, I will give the administration time to see what policies that they come forth, but frankly, if we're going 2 or 3 days in, it's not looking very promising for geopolitical relations with Canada right now.
Great. Thank you to all three of you. We're going to go ahead and shift gears and talk a little bit about education, seeing that we have about 20 minutes left. So let's talk a little bit about the Senate Study Bill 1065. How is that good for all students and families of Iowa? And this is in reference to student first scholarships or school vouchers. And Senator Whiting, if you want to go ahead and start.
Sure. So I see it has a Senate study bill title. It's an education bill, and I think it might be a governor priority bill. I haven't read it yet. As I understand, things came out maybe on Thursday or something like that. So I haven't read the bill to know what's in there. But I can speak generally to this: is how do we make sure that we're focused on providing the best education for kids? And I don't use this term disparagingly, but right now, essentially, the public schools sort of have a monopoly on that, the way that we fund it, the amount of schools that we have, and the number of kids that go into it. So what we want to focus on is how do we give parents choice in education and make sure that kids are being educated in a way that the family sees as the best way possible. For most people across the state of Iowa, that is probably going to be through the public schools. We have sent our son through public school, through the preschool process, and that's been good. I'm a product of Spirit Lake High Schools, and I got a tremendous education there. So it's not a criticism of public schools, but it's making sure that the single largest expenditure that we use our state funding for goes to education, and how do we make sure to use that properly? And so we have this debate, at the above K-12 level at the Regent universities and the community colleges is I think you get a better return on investment and bang for your buck by investing in community colleges than you do the Regent universities. So maybe that's something we need to tackle. And then specifically to this question about the K-12 funding is how do we make sure that parents have those choices? And so, a lot of the emails that I've been getting from people is saying, well, public dollars should be used for public schools. Well, I think we need to change the narrative on that line of thinking and say education we can consider to be a public good. And how do we spend the state money to accomplish that public good? We can say things like we think wind technology or solar technology or geothermal technology are good for the public good, so we incentivize those things with tax credits and the like. There are ways that we can do that to incentivize education as a public good and not have it necessarily go through the public schools by looking at those tax credits and things like that need not necessarily go to a full voucher system. So I have long advocated for parental choice in education. I ran on it. I was elected on it. There's a great deal of support for that in my district. I love all my superintendents in my district. There's probably one I don't get along with that well, but I have a great relationship with them. And Terry at the Spencer schools, you're one of them. We get along really well. So I want to work with you on this bill as I understand to be a governor priority and how we tackle this issue. But we need to look at it from how can we best educate our students and give parents the choice to educate their students. And the pandemic has showed us we are educating our kids in different ways. And there's, if the schools are shut down or the jobs are shut down and there's no access to daycare, what do we do? And then just one other point I would add into that is another priority that our caucus has identified is how do we make sure that we have that kids and parents have the opportunity for their kids, if they want to be in school 100% of the time, to do that. I think around here our schools have done a tremendous job. There's a handful of schools across the state that have done a terrible job. And so we need to look, do we need to do a one-size-fits-all approach? Do we need to maybe address some of those school districts that have not done a good job? But that becomes a very real question, is when you're trying to go back to work and the school's shut down and there's no daycare, what do you do? And I don't want to just see kids, thrown to the neighbors and to the friend of the friend of the friend. That's dangerous. And so all of those things kind of flow into this question here is I got to get back to you on the specifics of Senate Study Bill 1065, but those are some of my thoughts more generally on the issue of choice, parental choice, and finding alternative ways to use our tax dollars appropriately.
Great. Thank you, Senator. And as Senator Whiting mentioned, this question is from Terry Heeman. He's the superintendent for Spencer Public Schools. Representative Megan Jones, would you go ahead and address the question?
Sure. So this is a Senate bill, and I'm trying to stay in my lane as much as I can over in the House. So I don't know the contents of that bill, but if it is it the governor's bill?
I think so.
Okay. So if it is the governor's bill, we often don't memorize the numbers of the bills, but I will say that there is a piece of that bill, where she took language directly from constituents in House District 2 in Northwest Iowa, and I was so excited to hear that she had incorporated that in her bill. And while it's maybe small potatoes to some people, it's a big deal to families, particularly who are open enrolling. And what is happening is that If you get permission from your school district of origin, and the governor's bill is very, very, very big. So it's not just about vouchers. It's not just about funding and money. There are real pieces that impact real people on a very personal level, and that's what I'll talk about here. So. Families are permitted to, if they are allowed to open enroll out of their school district of origin, that doesn't mean that their new school district can come pick up those kids. So we are having buses drive by houses and not able to pick up those kids from that are going to school, that should be on that same school bus, that are going to end up in the same location because their school district of origin did not give them permission to be transported by their new school district. So it is silly, it is ridiculous, and it is just a stranglehold on families who are hoping to open enroll for one reason or another. Maybe it's just that they're closer, maybe their parents work in that town or work in that community, they just have more ties. Or they offer a different, programming or a different class or something, or sometimes they can just better fit the needs of that kid. And so I was really excited to see that the governor, and she and I hadn't even talked about this, but she just took that language and plopped it right in her bill. So I'm really excited to see that happening for folks here, so that they're not just held back from transportation, but they're allowed to go to that school district. Because it's one less barrier that parents have to deal with, and trying to get their kids to school, and trying to be as open and transparent as possible. So I'm pretty excited that piece is in there. So my bill won't be moving on, but hopefully that piece will be moving on in the governor's bill. But I will just generally, I'm already seeing emails come in saying, it's us versus them, and it's not. It is not public versus private. We are all in this together, and we all want what is right for every kid. And so a one-size-fits-all plan is probably not correct. We need to give families and kids options, especially as we battle through a pandemic, to be able to get those kids educated. So I guess I'm with Senator Whiting, and I suspect I'm with Senator Wills here. Or Senator, whoa.
Oh, that's a promotion.
I'm sorry. I'm with Representative Wills. We just need some options in education to help educate our kids. Thanks.
Great, thank you. And Representative Wills, if you would go ahead and discuss the question as well.
I'm going to use a very popular term that Senator Jones over here has. How egregious. We have a lot of fun, as well as do serious business, so hopefully everybody understands that we're just having fun up here. This is my first year on the Education Committee, and so I have a lot to learn, but I also have a lot of strong feelings one way or the other. I was able to see this bill about 2 weeks ago in its draft form. It has a lot of stuff in it. It seems to be that the focus is right now on these, what people call ESAs or vouchers. I call them scholarships. Really, the focus, people are losing the focus on this program because right now it only affects schools that are underperforming. There's only one school in Northwest Iowa that is underperforming according to the rules that are written into this bill. And it is a huge bill, so I don't know everything that's in there. There's about 9 or 10 sections. Each one could be its own bill. It's that big of a bill. It's that broad of a step. But the ESAs, or what I call scholarships, seem to be the one that's getting the most attention right now. And really, these scholarships offer parents in these consistently underperforming schools the option. That's all that this bill is doing right now, is giving these parents in these underperforming schools the option of moving their child to a school that will really serve that child better. It doesn't have anything to do with a statewide voucher program or a statewide evil, we're going to destroy public schools program. This is simply saying, parents, if you're in a school that isn't fixing itself, a school that isn't moving forward and doing the right things for your kid, then we're going to give you the option of a scholarship where you could bring your child wherever that you find that it will fit your child best. And so I think that it has a lot of promise, a lot of merit. and I'm really looking forward to it. Now, I submitted a bill several years ago, and I have, in fact, it's just come out of drafting, and it's going to be made public. If it hasn't been made public on Friday, it will be public on Monday. But it basically says the same thing. We don't have a companion bill in the House that I know of for the Senate file, Senate Study Bill 1065. Seems like it's just going to originate in the Senate and come over to the House. But in the meantime, we're still working and doing things that promote kind of what we think is the right thing. But my bill from several years ago basically offered scholarships to students in consistently underperforming schools. And at that time, and I haven't done the research to see what it is today, but at that time, there were only 8 schools in the state of Iowa that fit that criteria. Basically, what my bill would do is say to the parents of that school district, you have 3 choices. Parents, you can petition the school board and dissolve the school, and then your students would be absorbed into the neighboring school district. Or parents, you can petition the school board and have the school board offer you vouchers so that you can bring your student to wherever you want to go. Or the third thing is, parents, you can petition the school board and create a charter school in your school's place. Now, these are all 3 good options where we have schools that are consistently underperforming. And I will say just exactly what I said 3 or 4 years ago. Why in the world are we putting up with consistently underperforming schools in the state of Iowa where we should be tops in the nation for education? Why are we allowing these schools to not improve? Why are we not allowing these schools to not get better and help our kids? And I will tell you this, the schools that I did research on several years ago when this bill first came out were schools in the poorer districts, schools in the less affluent areas. So not only are those schools, not only are those kids being hurt just because of their position in life, but they're now being hurt because their schools are underperforming and not giving them the education that they deserve. And so we really need to move on this. We really need to look at what we're doing for our kids, especially in the inner cities, especially in those schools that are less affluent. We need to make sure that they have the resources that they need, and if they can't provide them, then those parents need to have the choice of bringing their kid wherever they feel will fit their kid better.
Great. Thank you very much, Representative Wills. With the time, we are going to go ahead and start closing comments. So Senator Whiting, if you would like to go ahead and take a few minutes and offer us any further comments.
Well, I'd just like to thank everybody that submitted questions. I'd like to thank my colleagues for being here and everybody that helped put this on. It's it's a different method of doing this, but it's still an opportunity that we can be asked questions directly by our constituents and be responsive to them. And any questions that you have or any concerns, ideas that you have about the bills that we tackle or issues that you think we need to tackle, always feel free to email me or contact me. Be happy to do that. We still have a few weeks to continue to draft bills and get them in before and try to get them through the committee process before our final deadline. There's just one thing I'd just like to touch on real quickly is I'm the new chair of the Labor and Business Relations Committee. And one of the issues that I've talked about for some time, and we've identified also as one of these top 2 or 3 issues, is workforce needs in Iowa. And the Labor and Business Relations Committee, probably for about the last 4 years, and I wasn't here for this, you guys were, but probably considered the public union busting committee. And as I've told folks that represent labor interests and even the Democrats on the committee, we're not relitigating Chapter 20 this year, but this committee can be so much more than that if you let it. And we've done a lot of really good bills already in the first few weeks in the Labor and Business Relations Committee to address workforce and workplace issues. And 3 of them that I want to highlight are things that you've probably heard me speak about before. We need to find ways, innovative ways, to bring people into the state of Iowa to fill our critical workforce needs. Before COVID, we had a very low unemployment rate, perhaps among the lowest in the nation, and some 60,000 jobs that needed to be filled. So we have more jobs. We have a greater need for jobs than we have people to fill them. And so what can we do to address that is how do we bring in people from sister states that can easily transition into the state of Iowa and take advantage of our high quality of life and low cost of living. And so 3 of the bills that we tackled this week last week in the Labor Committee are 2 of them are tax incentives, income and property tax rebate incentives to get people to move into the state. And then City Manager here in Spencer, Amanda Mack, will be very excited to hear about this because we've talked about it a lot, is this remote worker bill, this idea of how do you incentivize people that may work for a large corporation anywhere in the country and can live and work anywhere they have broadband, bring them into the state of Iowa. We've introduced that bill again. We got it out of subcommittee, and it's something I'd like to see go forward as a matter of policy discussion. And it's very acute and critical right now in a pandemic when we've seen people go to remote, workforces. Why not have those people come and live and work in Iowa, pay taxes, and take advantage of all the great things that we have to offer? So that's what I'm excited about, and look forward to speaking with you all in future sessions.
Great. Thank you very much, Senator Whiting. Representative Wills, if you want to go ahead and give us a few closing comments.
I'd be happy to. I want to first say, the pandemic, everybody's like, oh boy, we're in bad shape, everything's terrible, this is the worst thing ever. But Iowa's in a great position right now. We came out of the pandemic, the #1 state in the nation, financially able to handle the pandemic, financially able to come out of the pandemic in good shape. #1 state in the nation. That's a good thing to be hanging our hat on. We're tied for the lowest unemployment rate in the nation right now, I believe at 3.8%, something 3.5, 3.8, something like that. That's huge. We basically need more employees in the state. We need more people to legally immigrate to our great state because we have a great place to live and we have jobs for them to take. We have a great ability to bring businesses and corporations to the state of Iowa so that even more jobs would be available, good paying, high paying jobs. We have one of the lowest rates of cost of livings in the nation, if not the lowest cost of living in the nation. And so we've got a lot of good things looking up. The pandemic has put a damper on some things. The pandemic has caused us to say, well, whoa, we got some problems too. The governor has, through her emergency decrees, has shut businesses down temporarily in order to limit or slow the spread of the virus. That has harmed some businesses. That has slowed some growth of businesses. I'm proud to say that in the Iowa House, we had some people go to the governor and say, you need to make this right with some businesses. And so the governor has released $40 million of CARES Act money that would benefit bars and restaurants. Representative Shannon Lundgren was one of the House members that went to the governor and pleaded with her to release some of that federal money to help offset the damage that was done to these small businesses, bars and restaurants, and help them out just so that they can stay in business. This will provide up to $25,000 grants to these bars and restaurants just so they can stay in business and operate and continue to move on. We've heard so many stories of bars and restaurant owners going into a second mortgage on their home so that they can keep their business open. And so we really need to make it right with some of these businesses and move forward and come off of our strong economy and make our state of Iowa even better. But I think the future is bright for us, and I'm looking forward to the next year. So thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Representative Wills. Representative Jones, a few closing comments.
Yep, I've got a few minutes, it looks like, here, so I'll be quick. And I know a lot of the topics that we discussed today had to do with outside the Capitol building. So we talked a lot about federal issues, we talked about some county issues, we talked about vaccines, which is more kind of an executive branch federal government relationship happening right now. But certainly we are happy to engage and help track down answers to some of those questions. But I also, while there may be some of these big issues kind of taking up a lot of space, don't forget the small things, and please reach out to us if there is a regulation that is getting in your way, if something is just bothering you or bugging you. I had a lady reach out to me a few weeks ago because she figured out that she made a purchase online and then she returned it pretty quickly, and it was kind of an electronic thing, and she returned it, but then they didn't return her sales tax. and it was like $1.32. You know, most people would just ignore it, but she pushed back on the company, and turns out Iowa law does not require them to pay that sales tax back in the instance of a return. Instead, you're supposed to go back to the Department of Revenue, prove that you made a return, and then the Department of Revenue is supposed to issue a check for $1.32. That is garbage. That is a whole bunch of baloney. And while it's only $1.32, think of how much money that is that people aren't noticing, especially on online transactions. And it just bugs her. And so, you know, it's things like that, you know, I'm happy to engage on. Like, let's fix some of those things. Let's tighten up some of that language. Let's make sure that Iowa is working and being the fairest possible state that we possibly can be. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us. It doesn't have to be about, you know, these big overarching issues. Something as small as $1.32 does matter, and we care about it, and so let's go ahead and fix it. Thanks.
Great, thank you. On behalf of the Spencer Chamber of Commerce, I'd like to thank all of those who submitted questions for today's session. Thank you again to Auditor Rob Sand, Senator Whiting, Representative Jones, and Representative Wills for giving of their time this weekend and share current information about what's happening in the State House. And to our event sponsors, Spencer Municipal Utilities and Farmers Trust and Savings Bank. Thank you to the Spencer Police Department, Spencer Municipal Utilities, Mediacom, Spencer Radio Group, the Spencer Daily Reporter, the Spencer Signal, and Y100 for covering this forum so those in Northwest Iowa can be up to date on statewide topics. The next Eggs and Issues session will be on Saturday, February 27th. And a decision will be made shortly regarding the format. So you can stay tuned to the Chamber of Commerce Facebook page as well as our website and any of those partners that work with us to get this information out. Thank you again, and have a great weekend.